In the quiet suburb of Maple Ridge, the kind of place where people waved from driveways and argued politely about lawn fertilizer, everyone knew Arthur Coleman as Mr. Art. He was 76, tall in the way old men get when they're mostly spine and stubbornness, with silver hair combed back and hands that still looked capable of fixing anything. Arthur didn't talk much about his past. He didn't need to. The evidence sat in his garage, neatly labeled toolboxes, a workbench worn smooth, and a faded photo pinned above it, him in a hard hat beside a younger man holding a baby. That baby was his grandson, Logan. Logan had been Arthur's heartbeat since the day he was born. When Logan's parents died in a winter highway accident, one of those tragedies that knocks the air out of an entire family, Arthur stepped in without hesitation. He didn't ask what it would cost. He didn't calculate the years. He just reached into the rubble of loss and pulled the boy out with both hands. Arthur raised Logan like a second chance. He cooked dinners, packed lunches, attended parent-teacher nights with a tie he always wore crooked, and sat through little league games even when the cold numbed his knees. When Logan wanted a bike, Arthur bought it. When he wanted braces, Arthur wrote the check. When he wanted a better college, Arthur took on extra handyman work on weekends even though his doctor told him to slow down. Logan grew up fast, tall, charming, ambitious. The kind of kid who could smile his way out of trouble. And Arthur, God help him, mistook charm for gratitude. By the time Logan married, Arthur was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep cures, but the kind that comes from decades of showing up even when you're running on fumes. Logan's wife, Madison, was a polished woman with perfect nails and a voice that always sounded like she was being recorded. She said Arthur instead of Grandpa, as if Grandpa was too intimate, too messy. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to, her disapproval was surgical. The first time Madison came to dinner, Arthur served pot roast and mashed potatoes the way Logan liked. Madison picked at it, smiling sweetly. "This is comforting," she said like she was describing a hospital blanket. Logan laughed. "Babe, Grandpa's cooking built me." Arthur laughed too, because he wanted it to stay light. He didn't notice Madison's eyes flick over the cabinets, the worn countertops, the framed photos, measuring, evaluating, planning. After the wedding, Logan and Madison moved into a townhouse across town. They were starting their life, they said, but starting seemed expensive. There was always something new: furniture, a car upgrade, a honeymoon extension, a small investment in Logan's business idea. And Arthur, who had a savings account built from a lifetime of overtime and modest living, kept stepping in. "Just this once," Logan would say, voice gentle, hand on Arthur's shoulder like a lever. And Arthur would nod because Logan's voice still carried the echo of a little boy calling him from a playground. When the townhouse became too small, they came with the biggest ask yet. Logan sat at Arthur's kitchen table, his arm around Madison. Madison placed a folder in front of Arthur like it was a gift. "Grandpa," Logan said, "we found the perfect house. Great neighborhood, good schools for when we have kids. It's just the market is insane. We need help with the down payment." Arthur stared at the folder. The number printed on the page looked like a punch. Madison leaned in. "We're not asking for charity," she said softly. "Think of it as investing in your family." Arthur's mouth went dry. He should have asked questions. He should have said no. He should have guarded the little nest egg he'd worked so hard to build. But then Logan smiled, the same smile he had at 8 years old when Arthur brought home a baseball glove. So Arthur did what he had always done. He gave, not just money either. When Logan and Madison bought the 2-story colonial on Maple Ridge Lane, Arthur helped with everything. He painted the spare room. He installed shelves. He replaced a leaky faucet. He mowed the lawn the first summer because Logan's back was acting up. Then slowly the tone changed. At first it was small. "Can you call before coming over?" Madison said one day, still smiling. "I always do," Arthur replied. "Well," she said lightly, "sometimes it feels like you don't." Then it became, "You should use the side door." Then, "Please don't rearrange things." Arthur tried to make himself smaller, quieter, less in the way, but it didn't matter. Because the problem wasn't Arthur's behavior. The problem was Arthur's presence. And one afternoon, in the middle of a bright September day, Arthur arrived with a bag of Logan's favorite muffins, blueberry, the kind with sugar crystals on top. He stepped inside, calling, "Logan, Maddie." He heard his grandson's laugh from the living room and Madison's voice, smooth and sharp as a knife. "Honestly, Logan," she said, "it's like we're renting our own life from your grandfather." Arthur froze in the foyer, muffins heavy in his hands. Then Logan spoke, and Arthur felt something inside him crack. "You're right," Logan said. "I'll handle it." Arthur didn't announce himself. He didn't step forward like a man who wanted a fight. He stood in the foyer for a long moment, listening to the muffled sounds of the life he had helped build, his grandson's laughter, the television humming, Madison's calm certainty. He could have walked back out. He could have pretended he heard nothing. But the muffins were still warm through the paper bag, and something about that, something so ordinary, so loving, made the humiliation sharper. He walked into the living room. Logan turned, surprise flashing across his face, then settling into a practiced grin. "Grandpa, hey, when did you get here?" Madison didn't jump, she didn't flinch. She looked up slowly from her phone as if Arthur was an email she'd been expecting. Arthur held up the bag. "Brought you muffins," he said. His voice didn't tremble, he was proud of that. Logan glanced at Madison, then back to Arthur. The grin returned, thinner now. "Thanks, Grandpa," Madison set her phone down with careful precision. "Arthur," she said, "this isn't a good time." "It sounded like a good time," Arthur replied before he could stop himself. "You were talking about me," Logan's face tightened. "Grandpa," Arthur looked at him, really looked, not at the shape of the man, but at the boy he had carried on his shoulders, the boy whose scraped knees he had cleaned, the boy who used to fall asleep against his chest during thunderstorms. "I heard what you said," Arthur told Logan, "and I heard what you promised." Madison stood, smoothing the front of her blouse. "We weren't discussing you," she said, even though they had been. "We were discussing boundaries." Arthur let out a quiet breath. "Boundaries," he repeated, as if tasting the word. Logan rose too, stepping closer, close enough to feel like a wall. "Grandpa, look," he began, voice dropping into that tone people use when they think you're fragile. "Madison just means sometimes it's a lot. You show up, you fix things, you offer advice. It's like we don't get to be adults in our own house." Arthur's fingers tightened around the muffin bag. "Your house," he said carefully. Madison's smile returned bright and empty. "Yes," she said, "our house." Arthur's chest tightened. Not because he wanted credit, but because the lie was so easy for them. So clean. "I paid the down payment," Arthur said quietly, "and the closing costs, and the new roof when the inspection came back. And the first year of property taxes when you said the escrow surprised you." Logan's cheeks reddened. "Grandpa, you offered." "I offered because you asked," Arthur corrected. "And because I love you." Madison's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Love doesn't mean control," she said. "And if we're being honest, Arthur, you've been hovering." Arthur, who'd worked his whole life, who'd raised Logan out of grief, who'd given without keeping score, was now a hovering nuisance. Logan rubbed his face, frustration leaking through. Okay, he snapped, then caught himself. "Grandpa, we appreciate what you did, but this can't keep happening." "What can't keep happening?" Arthur asked. This guilt," Logan said, voice rising. "You bringing up money like we're thieves. Madison doesn't feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable. We're married now. We have our own life." Arthur stared at him. "So you want me gone?" Logan hesitated, just long enough to make it hurt more. Then he nodded once, quick and decisive, like ripping off a bandage. Madison took a step forward, gentle as a nurse. "We think it would be best if you stopped coming by unannounced," she said. "Maybe for a while." "For a while," Arthur echoed. And Logan added, eyes hard now, "We need the spare room. Madison's sister might move in for a bit." "So you can't stay here anymore." Arthur blinked. "Stay here." Madison tilted her head. "You've been leaving things," she said, as if he were clutter. "Your tools, some clothes in the guest closet." "It's confusing." Arthur felt heat crawl up his neck. Confusing, as if the past decade was confusion. He swallowed. "I didn't think I was staying," he said slowly. "I thought I was family." Logan exhaled sharply. "Grandpa, don't make this dramatic." Arthur laughed once bitter. "Dramatic." He held up the muffins. "I brought you muffins, Logan." Madison's voice stayed calm, but her words sharpened. "Arthur, we're asking you to leave." Logan's shoulders squared as if he'd finally found his spine. "Yeah," he said louder. "Leave, right now." The room went very still. Arthur looked from Madison to Logan, searching for softness, for shame, for the smallest flicker of the grandson he knew. But Logan's expression was locked, defensive, offended, almost relieved. Arthur's hands loosened. The muffin bag slipped slightly. Sugar crystals fell like tiny broken promises. "Okay," Arthur said, and the word surprised him with how steady it came out. "Okay." He walked toward the door, steps measured. Behind him, Madison's voice floated after him, sweet as poison. "Please don't come back without calling." Arthur paused at the threshold and turned just once. "Logan," he said quietly. Logan met his gaze, jaw clenched. Arthur wanted to say, "I'd do it all again." He wanted to say, "I forgive you." Instead, he said, "I hope you learn what it costs to throw away someone who loved you before you even knew how to speak." Logan scoffed. "Don't guilt trip me." Arthur nodded as if accepting the final insult. Then he stepped outside. The sunlight was too bright, the air smelled like cut grass and distant barbecue smoke. Normal life went on. Arthur stood on the porch for a moment, and for the first time since Logan was a child, he felt truly alone. He walked to his car, placed the muffins in the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. His hands trembled now, not from age, from grief, and then slowly his trembling stopped, because beneath the grief something else began to rise, a cold, clear understanding. Love had built that house. But love was not the only thing that could claim it. Arthur didn't drive home right away. He sat in the car for a long time, staring at the colonial house with its white trim and manicured shrubs, the house that wore his money like a nice suit. The house where he had crawled into the attic to run insulation because Logan said hiring someone was too expensive. The house where Madison had asked him to wipe his shoes at the door like he was a deliveryman. The muffins cooled between them. Arthur's phone buzzed once, a text from Logan, "Please respect our wishes. Don't come back." Arthur read it twice, then set the phone down. He expected to cry. Instead, he found himself thinking about documents, about signatures, about the quiet way Logan and Madison had pushed papers across tables, smiling while Arthur signed because they said it was standard, just for the bank, no big deal. Arthur had always believed family didn't require legal armor. But family, he realized, was sometimes the first place you needed it. He drove to his small ranch-style home across town, the one he had kept even after helping Logan buy Maple Ridge, because Arthur didn't trust luck. The place smelled like cedar and old books. It was modest, but it was his. He carried the muffins inside, set them on the kitchen counter, and stared at them like evidence. Then he went to the hall closet and pulled out a battered metal box. Arthur wasn't careless. He came from a generation that kept receipts and warranties and birth certificates like they were sacred texts. The box contained exactly that, order in a world that could turn on you. He opened it, fingers moving with purpose now. He found bank statements showing transfers, $25,000 here, $40,000 there, a cashier's check copy for the down payment, a receipt from the roofing company, property tax records, and then, what he hadn't wanted to admit existed, copies of the closing documents. Arthur sat at the dining table under the yellow light and spread everything out like a man preparing for surgery. Most of the legal language was dense, but Arthur didn't need to understand every word to recognize the shapes of truth. One document caught his eye, promissory note. He leaned closer. The note showed Logan's name, Madison's name. And Arthur's eyes ran down the page. Borrower agrees to repay secured by in the event of default. Arthur's throat tightened. Logan had told him the money was a loan in spirit, nothing official, just family. But the paper said otherwise, or rather, it said something important. They had signed, they had acknowledged it as a debt, and it wasn't the only paper that mattered. Arthur flipped through the stack until he found what his instincts had been searching for. A separate document attached to the mortgage package, a small recorded instrument that felt like a trap hidden in plain sight. The next morning, Arthur put on his best jacket, navy, slightly outdated but clean, and drove downtown to an office building that smelled like copier toner and polished stone. He had looked up an attorney late the night before, his hands steady on the keyboard. Real estate attorney, elder, financial exploitation. The name that kept appearing in reviews was Diane Ramirez. Diane was in her late 40s, sharp-eyed, with a calm face that suggested she had heard every story people tried to tell themselves to avoid shame. Arthur sat across from her, paperwork stacked between them. He didn't dramatize. Arthur wasn't a dramatic man. He told her what happened, how he raised Logan, how he paid, how he was pushed out like trash. Diane listened without interrupting, only nodding occasionally. When he finished, she asked one question. "Did you give them the money as a gift, or did they agree to repay it?" Arthur hesitated. "They said they'd make it right. That it was temporary." Diane looked down at the promissory note. "They didn't just say it," she replied. "They signed it." Arthur's stomach turned, equal parts relief and nausea. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means you have options," Diane said, and her voice was firm now. "More than you think." She began sorting the papers into piles, payments, agreements, property records. Her hands moved like she was turning chaos into a case. "This house," she said, tapping the address, "whose name is on the deed?" "Logan and Madison," Arthur admitted. Diane nodded. "Okay, that makes it harder, but not impossible. Because if you funded the purchase and there was an agreement to repay, and if there was deception or coercion or misuse of trust, we can pursue claims." Arthur frowned. "Coercion?" Diane looked up. "Arthur, you're an elderly person who used life savings to benefit family members who then removed you and refused repayment. Depending on facts, that can fall under undue influence or elder financial exploitation. The words hit Arthur like a door opening. Exploitation, not a family disagreement, not a misunderstanding. Exploitation. Arthur swallowed. Will I have to testify against him? Diane's gaze softened, but she didn't lie. Most likely, yes. Arthur looked down at his hands. They seemed older today. Then he remembered Logan's face, the scoff, the dismissal, the casual cruelty of the text message. Arthur lifted his eyes. I didn't want this, he said quietly. I know, Diane replied. But wanting it isn't required, evidence is. She slid a document toward him. First, she said, we preserve everything, texts, receipts, bank records. Second, we file a demand for repayment and notice that litigation is coming if they refuse. Third, if they ignore it, we file. Arthur stared at the paper. For a moment he imagined Logan as a boy again, running barefoot across Arthur's yard, laughing. Then he imagined Logan standing in that living room telling him to leave. Arthur picked up the pen, his hand didn't shake. Do it, he said. Diane nodded once. Okay, then we do it. And for the first time since he stepped off that porch, Arthur felt something close to control return to his bones. Not vengeance, not yet, just the steady, righteous movement of consequences beginning to turn. Logan didn't think about Arthur for 3 days. That wasn't because he had no conscience, at least, not in the way villains in movies have none. Logan simply had a talent for rearranging reality until he was always the victim of someone else's expectations. When guilt rose, he pushed it down with logic. Grandpa was old-fashioned. Grandpa was clingy. Grandpa didn't understand boundaries, and Madison helped. She was the kind of woman who could take any act of cruelty and wrap it in the language of self-care. You did the right thing, she told Logan while she poured coffee into a mug that said hustle in gold letters. Your grandfather was controlling you with money. Logan rubbed his temples. He's not controlling, he's just intense. Madison sat beside him, her hand on his thigh. Logan, listen to me. He chose to give you that money. He's using it now to keep himself relevant. Don't fall for it. Logan exhaled. He wanted to believe her because believing her meant he didn't have to face the uglier truth, that he had taken love and treated it like a resource. A week after the eviction, Logan was in the driveway washing his car when a white sedan pulled up. A woman stepped out, professional clothes, a leather folder, expression neutral. She walked up the path with the steady purpose of someone delivering whether you can't negotiate with. Logan straightened, water hose still running. Can I help you? The woman held up an envelope. Logan Coleman. Yeah, she nodded. You've been served. The words were simple, ordinary, yet the air seemed to thicken around them. Madison came to the door, eyes narrowing. What is this? The process server didn't engage. She simply handed the envelope to Logan and turned away. Logan stared at the paper as if it might burst into flames. This is ridiculous, he muttered, ripping it open with wet fingers. Madison leaned over his shoulder. Her perfume smelled expensive and cold. Inside was a formal letter on legal letterhead. Arthur Coleman v. Logan Coleman and Madison Coleman demand for repayment and notice of intent to file suit. Logan's throat went tight. He skimmed, eyes snagging on the numbers. The amount demanded wasn't just the down payment. It was everything. Down payment, closing costs, repairs, taxes, loans, even smaller transfers that Logan barely remembered because they had felt like oxygen, ever present, taken for granted. At the bottom were the words that made Logan's stomach drop. Failure to respond within 10 days will result in immediate legal action, including claims under applicable elder financial exploitation statutes, and pursuit of remedies that may include lay-ins, forced sale, and recovery of funds. Madison's face hardened. He's suing us, she hissed. Logan reread the sentence. He can't, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Madison snatched the letter from his hands. This is manipulation, she snapped. He's trying to scare you. Logan looked at the legal letterhead, the attorney's name, the firm address, the crisp certainty. It didn't feel like a scare tactic. It felt like Arthur had finally stopped begging to be loved. Madison scoffed. We'll call him, we'll shut this down. Logan hesitated. Maybe we should talk to him first, like calmly. Madison's eyes flashed. You think he wants calm, he wants control. If we give him an inch, he'll move into the guest room again and start running your life. Logan swallowed. But the money, Madison's smile returned thin. Logan, we have a mortgage, we have bills. We can't just hand over hundreds of thousands of dollars because he feels offended. Offended. That word made Logan wince, but he didn't argue. Madison's confidence was a blanket he wrapped around himself when he didn't want to feel cold. He called the number on the letter anyway. It went to voicemail. He tried again later. Nothing. Arthur wasn't chasing anymore. 2 days passed, then 3. Logan barely slept. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped. He started noticing things he hadn't noticed before, like how the house felt heavier when you remembered it wasn't built on gratitude. On the 4th day, another envelope arrived, this time certified mail. Madison signed for it with a sharp flourish. Inside were copies of records, bank transfers, cashier's checks, receipts, and most chilling, a copy of the promissory note. Madison's lips parted slightly as she read. This can't be real," she whispered. Logan stared at the signatures, his signature, Madison's signature. They had signed it at closing, half listening, eager to get the keys, trusting the broker's smile, assuming paperwork was just paperwork. Arthur hadn't assumed. Arthur had saved everything. Madison threw the papers onto the table. "So what? He still can't take the house. The deed is ours." Logan didn't answer because something in him finally understood. The deed said one thing. But the story behind the deed, who paid, who promised, who deceived, could say something else in a courtroom. And the law didn't care about Madison's tone or Logan's excuses. The law cared about facts. That night, Logan sat alone in the living room while Madison slept upstairs. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a stage after the lights go out, empty, echoing, haunted by what was done. Logan opened the demand letter again, reading the line about elder exploitation. His mouth went dry. For the first time, the question he'd avoided rose in full clarity. What if Grandpa doesn't lose? What if Grandpa wins? And somewhere across town, in his modest ranch home, Arthur sat at his own table with Diane Ramirez on speakerphone, reviewing the next step. Diane's voice was calm, precise. "They've been notified," she said. "Now we wait out the deadline. If they don't pay or settle, we file." Arthur looked at the photo in his garage, the one of him, a younger man and a baby. His voice was low but steady. "They won't pay," he said. Diane paused. "Are you sure?" Arthur's eyes didn't leave the baby's face. "Yes," he replied, "so we file." And the clock started ticking toward a courtroom where love would no longer be the currency. Evidence would on the 11th day. Diane Ramirez filed the complaint. Arthur didn't feel triumphant when she called him. He felt quiet, like a man who had finally stopped trying to solve a moral problem with kindness. "They didn't respond?" Arthur asked, though he already knew. "No meaningful response," Diane said. "Their attorney sent a short letter denying everything and calling the payments gifts. But we have the promissory note, the transfer records, and the timeline of how they removed you from the property." Arthur stared out his kitchen window at the bare branches in his yard. "So what happens now?" "Now," Diane replied, "the court process begins. We serve them, they answer, then discovery. We request documents, depose them, and build the story with evidence." "Depose," Arthur repeated. "It means they answer questions under oath," Diane said, "and lying has consequences." Arthur's lips pressed into a thin line. Consequences. A word he'd avoided using with Logan his whole life. Across town, Logan found out the lawsuit was real when Madison slammed a thick stack of papers on the island like she was trying to break the granite. "He filed," she said, voice tight. "He actually filed." Logan's stomach dropped as he stared at the caption, "Arthur Coleman, plaintiff. Logan Coleman and Madison Coleman, defendants." Underneath were paragraphs that read like a stranger's version of their life, cold, numbered, unforgiving. It described Arthur's age, his role as caretaker, the money, the reliance, the trust, the way Logan and Madison benefited. Then in language that made Logan's skin prickle, undue influence, conversion, unjust enrichment, elder financial exploitation. Madison paced, phone in hand. "Our lawyer says we should be careful." That this could get messy. Logan's mouth felt dry. "It already is messy." Madison spun toward him. "Do you understand what this could do if people find out, if your clients find out you're being sued for exploiting your grandfather?" "I didn't exploit him," Logan snapped, louder than he meant to. "He wanted to help." Madison's eyes narrowed. "Then why did you throw him out?" Logan froze. He hadn't expected that question from her. Not when she'd been the one pushing. Not when she'd smiled while Arthur stood in the doorway. Madison's tone softened immediately, like a therapist adjusting her approach. "Logan, don't get defensive. We did what we had to do, but now we have to protect ourselves. Protect ourselves." Logan looked down at the paperwork again and felt a sensation he couldn't name, like the house itself had shifted slightly under his feet. 2 days later, the first formal request arrived, interrogatories and requests for production. Lists of questions and demands for documents, years of bank statements, contracts, emails, text messages, proof of what had been said, promised, implied. Logan handed the packet to Madison. "Do we have to give them everything?" Madison's mouth flattened. "We'll give what we have to." but the truth was they didn't have much. They had memories and excuses. Arthur had receipts. The first deposition date came quickly, Arthur's deposition first, then theirs. The night before Arthur's deposition, Diane sat with him at his table, walking him through what to expect. "They'll try to make you look unreasonable," she warned. "They'll say you're bitter, controlling, maybe even confused. You stay calm, you tell the truth, you don't exaggerate." Arthur nodded. "I'm not here to punish him." Diane studied him. "Then why are you here?" Arthur's eyes drifted to the folded set of keys on his counter, Logan's spare, the one Arthur used to have before Madison demanded it back. "I'm here," Arthur said, voice steady, "because I'm done being treated like disposable." Diane nodded once. "Good, that's the truth." The next morning, Arthur sat in a conference room while a court reporter typed every word. Logan's attorney, a man with slick hair and a voice trained to sound polite while cutting, asked questions designed to make Arthur stumble. "Mr. Coleman, you're aware that you are not on the deed of the home, correct?" "Yes." "And you signed closing documents voluntarily?" "Yes." "So the money you provided, those were gifts?" "No," Arthur said calmly, "they were help. With the understanding it would be repaid." "Do you have a written agreement?" Diane slid the promissory note forward without a word. The attorney's eyes flicked down. A pause, a faint tightening at the corner of his mouth. Arthur watched him and felt something inside him settle. For years, he had worried about being unfair to Logan. Now he saw what fairness looked like, and in Logan's deposition was on a Thursday. He wore his nicest suit, the one he usually saved for closing deals and networking events, because if he looked confident enough, maybe he could convince the room and himself that he was still in control. Madison insisted on coming. She sat beside him, back straight, hands folded, face composed. Her calm was the kind that felt rehearsed. Diane Ramirez sat across the table, not smiling. A court reporter was already typing. Logan's attorney leaned in and whispered, "Answer only what's asked, do not volunteer." Logan nodded, swallowing hard. Diane began gently, almost conversationally. "Mr. Coleman, how old were you when your grandfather took you in?" Logan blinked. 8, and he raised you from then until adulthood?" "Yes." "Did he pay for your education?" "Yes." "Did he pay for your expenses after you married?" Logan's jaw tightened. "He helped." Diane's eyes didn't move. "Did you ask for that help?" Logan hesitated. "Sometimes." Diane slid a printed list across the table. "These are 27 transfers from Arthur Coleman to you, or to accounts you control, over a period of 4 years. Most are labeled loan or house in the memo line. Do you deny receiving these funds?" Logan glanced at his attorney, but the question demanded a yes or no. "No," he said quietly. "I don't deny it." Madison shifted slightly, her smile fixed. Diane continued. "At the closing of the Maple Ridge property, did you sign a promissory note?" Logan's throat went dry. "I signed what the broker put in front of me." "That wasn't my question," Diane said, still calm. "Did you sign it?" Logan exhaled. "Yes." "And the promissory note states repayment terms, correct?" Logan's voice sharpened. "I didn't read every line. We were told it was standard paperwork." Diane nodded as if that was expected. Then she asked, "Have you repaid any portion of this debt?" Logan swallowed. "No." "Why not?" Logan's mind raced. Madison's hand touched his knee under the table, pressure like a warning. "We had expenses," Logan said. "The mortgage, repairs, business costs. We planned to," Diane repeated softly. "When?" Logan opened his mouth, then closed it. Diane leaned in slightly. "Mr. Coleman, you told your grandfather you would make it right. Do you recall saying that?" "Yes." "And after you removed him from the home, you sent him a text saying, 'Please respect our wishes.' Don't come back, correct?" Logan's face flushed. "Yes." Diane's tone didn't change, but the room felt colder. "So to be clear, you accepted years of financial support, acknowledged it as a debt, repaid nothing, then expelled him and told him not to return." Logan's attorney objected. Argumentative, Diane nodded. "Let's rephrase. Mr. Coleman, did you ask your grandfather to leave the property?" Logan's mouth tightened. "Yes." "Did you tell him to leave immediately?" Logan stared at the table. "Yes." "Did you tell him he could not stay there anymore?" Logan whispered, "Yes." Madison's expression didn't crack, but Logan could feel her anger like heat. Diane slid another page forward. "This is the record of the down payment cashier's check. The purchaser line lists Logan Coleman and Madison Coleman. The remitter line lists Arthur Coleman. Why would your grandfather be listed as remitter if this were simply a gift?" Logan's voice rose. "Because he paid it." "Exactly," Diane said. Logan felt the trap close around him. Not a trap built by Diane, one built by his own choices. Then Diane turned to Madison. "Mrs. Coleman, you were present during the conversation where Arthur Coleman was asked to leave, correct?" Madison's smile widened. "We asked for space." Diane nodded. Did you tell him to leave? Madison's eyes flickered. I told him it wasn't a good time. Diane's voice stayed even. Did you say, we're asking you to leave? Madison hesitated. I might have said something like that. And did you instruct him not to return without calling? Madison lifted her chin. We needed boundaries. Diane stared at her for a long beat, then said, boundaries are not the same as eviction. Madison's smile finally slipped just a fraction. Logan felt the humiliation he'd forced on Arthur now being poured back into him, measured and official. When the deposition ended, Logan stood too quickly, chair scraping. Outside in the hallway, Madison grabbed his arm. You were weak, she hissed. You let her paint us like monsters. Logan pulled away. Because it sounds like monsters, he snapped, then immediately regretted it. Madison's eyes hardened. Don't you dare put this on me. Logan looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, he wondered if the marriage that had felt so shiny was actually a cage built from appearances. And Arthur, miles away, sat at home with Diane's call replaying in his mind. They admitted the key facts, she'd said. This is moving in our favor. Arthur set down the phone and stared at the quiet kitchen. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel grief. He felt gravity a month later. Diane filed a motion that changed everything. Arthur didn't fully understand the technical language, but he understood the goal: protect the asset. If Logan and Madison tried to refinance, sell, or transfer the Maple Ridge house to hide it from the case, Arthur could lose leverage. Diane wouldn't allow that. She requested a lease pendens, a formal notice filed in property records that the home was subject to ongoing litigation. It didn't take the house yet, but it locked the doors on any quiet escape. It's like putting a big sign on the property, Diane explained, that says, buyer beware, this house is in dispute. Arthur sat still, so they can't sell it. Not easily, she said, and they can't pretend the lawsuit doesn't exist. The judge granted it. Logan found out when he tried to refinance the mortgage to get a better rate. He sat across from a loan officer who suddenly looked nervous. I'm sorry, the woman said, tapping her screen. There's a recorded notice on the property. We can't proceed. Logan frowned. Recorded notice, the loan officer slid a printout across the desk. Notice of pending action. Logan's heart pounded. He snatched the paper and stared at the words. Madison's voice hissed in his head. He's trying to control you. But this wasn't control, this was strategy. When Logan got home, Madison was in the kitchen scrolling on her phone. He dropped the paper in front of her. What is this? He demanded. Madison read it, her face tightening as she moved through the paragraphs. He's trying to ruin us. Logan's voice rose. No, he's trying to get paid back. Madison slammed the paper down. You're taking his side now? Logan stared at her. I'm taking reality's side. Madison's eyes flashed. Reality is that we can't pay him, and if we lose the house, we lose everything. Logan paced. Then maybe we should settle. Madison laughed sharply. Settle. With a man who wants to humiliate us. Logan stopped. He didn't humiliate us, we humiliated him. The sentence hung in the air like a slap. Madison's mouth opened slightly, but she didn't speak. Logan's phone buzzed his attorney. We have a problem, the attorney said. Their side is pushing for an injunction on assets, and they're discussing elder exploitation claims seriously. That's not just money, that can involve penalties. Logan's skin went cold. Penalties, depending on the jurisdiction, the attorney replied. Elder exploitation statutes can increase damages. We need to be careful. Logan swallowed. So what do? The attorney sighed. We consider settlement. At least explore it. When Logan hung up, Madison was watching him like a judge. What did he say? She asked. Logan hesitated, then said, he said we should consider settling. Madison's face twisted. Your attorney is scared. That's all, we don't give in. Logan's chest tightened. But what if we lose? Madison stepped closer, voice low and deadly calm. We won't lose if you stop acting guilty. Logan stared at her. I am guilty. Madison's eyes narrowed. But Logan cut her off. I threw him out. I told him not to come back. I took everything he gave me and acted like he was a nuisance. Madison's voice sharpened. He was a nuisance. He wanted to run our life. Logan shook his head. No, he wanted to belong. Madison scoffed, turning away like she couldn't stand to look at weakness. Logan watched her, and something in him cracked again, but this time it wasn't grief. It was clarity. Meanwhile, Diane called Arthur with news. We're scheduling mediation, she said. They've started to feel the pressure. Arthur didn't celebrate. He just asked, will they apologize? Diane paused. Arthur, mediation is about settlement. Apologies aren't guaranteed. Arthur looked down at his hands. Then I don't want pretty words, he said. I want what's mine. Diane's voice softened. That's fair. Arthur hung up and sat in silence. He wasn't hunting revenge. He was reclaiming dignity, one legal step at a time. The mediation took place in a neutral office suite, beige walls, bottled water, uncomfortable chairs designed for people who weren't meant to stay long. Arthur arrived early with Diane. He wore the same navy jacket, pressed, and carried a folder thick with evidence. He didn't look angry. He looked prepared. Logan arrived with his attorney. Madison followed a step behind, dressed like she was attending a corporate event, her hair perfect, her expression composed. When Arthur saw Logan, something twisted in his chest. For a second, he saw the child again. Logan wouldn't meet his eyes. The mediator, an older man with kind eyes and a practiced voice, explained the rules. Private discussions, shuttle diplomacy, no direct confrontation unless both sides agreed. Arthur listened, nodding. Madison looked bored. They started in separate rooms. In Arthur's room, Diane laid out their position. We're asking for repayment based on the promissory note, reimbursement of documented expenses, and additional damages related to wrongful conduct and elder exploitation. Arthur stared at the mediator. I want my money back, he said simply, and I want the house dealt with if they can't pay. The mediator nodded, understood. He left to speak with Logan and Madison. Time passed in slow chunks. People came and went with offers and counteroffers like they were bargaining for a used car. Logan's first offer was an insult dressed as compromise. They'll pay back a small portion, the mediator said carefully, over time. No admission of wrongdoing. Diane's face stayed calm, but her eyes hardened. What portion? The mediator cleared his throat. 25,000. Arthur's mouth didn't open for a moment. Then he let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. I gave them more than that in 1 year, he said quietly. Diane leaned forward. That's not serious. The mediator nodded. I told them that might be your reaction. Arthur looked down at the paperwork in his lap, the check copies. The promissory note, the text message that told him not to come back. He thought of the muffins. Then he said no. The mediator went back. The next offer was 50,000, then 75, then a proposal that made Arthur's skin crawl. They offered to let him return to the guest room, as if belonging was a privilege they could grant. Arthur's voice was flat. No, Diane shook her head. Absolutely not. The mediator left again. When he returned, his expression was tighter. They want to speak directly, he said, just briefly if you're willing. Diane looked at Arthur. You don't have to. Arthur's hands folded together. Let them. A few minutes later, Logan and Madison walked into the room. Logan looked exhausted, his tie slightly loose, eyes red like he hadn't slept. Madison looked as polished as ever, but there was a sharpness to her jaw that betrayed irritation. The mediator sat between them like a referee. Logan finally looked at Arthur. His voice was rough. Grandpa, I didn't think it would go this far. Arthur's eyes stayed steady. It went as far as you pushed it. Logan swallowed. I'm sorry I told you to leave. Arthur felt the words land, but they didn't sink in. They were too late, too measured. Madison cut in smoothly. Arthur, we acknowledge you were hurt. But we need to find a practical solution. Arthur looked at her. You were the one who told me to leave. Madison smiled faintly. We asked for space. Arthur didn't raise his voice. You told me to leave immediately. Madison's smile tightened. We were under stress. Arthur nodded once, as if filing that excuse away. So was I for years, paying for your stress. Logan flinched. The mediator cleared his throat. Perhaps we can focus on numbers. Diane leaned in. We're willing to settle, she said, but it must reflect the documented debt and the reality of exposure at trial. Logan's attorney whispered something to him. Logan's shoulders slumped. Logan looked at Arthur again. What do you want from me? Arthur answered without hesitation. I want you to repay what you took, and I want you to understand you don't get to throw people away after you've used them. Madison's eyes flashed. Used? That's unfair. Arthur turned to her slowly. Is it? Madison opened her mouth, then said the thing that ended whatever softness might have been left. You're old, she snapped, the polish cracking. You don't even need that much money. You're doing this because you want attention. The room went silent. Logan turned toward her, stunned. But Madison didn't stop. We have our whole life ahead of us. We need this house. We need stability. You have what? A few years. Logan's face went white. The mediator raised a hand. Mrs. Coleman, Diane's voice was ice. That comment will be noted. Arthur sat perfectly still, but something in him shifted into place like a lock clicking shut. He looked at Madison with a calm that terrified even himself. Thank you, he said softly. Madison frowned. For what? For proving my case, Arthur replied. Logan's eyes filled with shame. Grandpa, I didn't know she would say that. Arthur's gaze moved back to Logan. You didn't know, he asked, or you just never stopped her? Logan's mouth opened. No answer came. Arthur stood up slowly, not dramatic, just final. Diane, he said, we're done here. The mediator looked alarmed. Mr. Coleman, please, Arthur shook his head. I came hoping there was a family left to salvage, but that, he glanced at Madison, told me everything. He looked at Logan one last time. I loved you enough to build your life, Arthur said quietly. Now I'm going to love myself enough to take it back. And with that, Arthur walked out of the mediation room, leaving Logan staring at the door, finally understanding that some doors don't reopen just because you regret slamming them. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant, like decisions that had been made long before anyone in the room was born. Arthur arrived with Diane and sat quietly on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, hands folded over a slim folder. He didn't look like a man chasing revenge. He looked like someone who had finally stopped accepting shame. Logan arrived 10 minutes late, hair slightly disheveled, face drawn tight. Madison walked beside him with her chin high, the same posture she wore at mediation, polished, defensive, unbothered. But her fingers kept tapping her phone screen in a rhythm that gave her away. When the bailiff called the case, Logan's shoulders rose with a breath he couldn't control. Inside, the judge sat elevated behind the bench, expression neutral. A flag stood in the corner. The room felt smaller than Logan expected, as if the building itself wanted people to be honest. Diane began with facts, not drama. She introduced the bank transfers, the cashier's check, the receipts, the property tax payments, the promissory note signed at closing. She explained the relationship. Arthur raised Logan after tragedy, served as his caretaker, and supported him financially through adulthood. She framed it simply. This is a case about misuse of trust, Diane said, voice steady, and an attempt to erase the obligation once the benefit was secured. Logan's attorney countered with the only story he had left, gifts. Families help each other, he argued. Mr. Coleman gave money voluntarily. There is no fraud here, only a family conflict. Then the judge asked the question that broke Logan's confidence in one sentence. Counsel, the judge said, eyes on Logan's attorney. If this was a gift, why is there a promissory note? The attorney's mouth opened, then closed. Your Honor, my clients were told it was standard paperwork. The judge's gaze shifted to Logan. Standard paperwork that states repayment terms, Logan swallowed. I didn't read it. The judge nodded once, expression unreadable. That's not a legal defense. When it was Logan's turn to speak, he felt like a child again, not in the warm way Arthur once made him feel, but in the exposed way you feel when the room sees through you. He tried, Your Honor, Logan said, voice tight. My grandfather and our relationship was complicated. He did help me, but I didn't force him, and I never meant to hurt him. The judge's eyes remained steady. Did you tell him to leave your home? Logan looked down. Yes. Did you tell him not to come back? Logan's voice dropped. Yes. After accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in support, Logan's throat worked. Yes. Then Madison took the stand. She smiled at the judge like a customer service rep who wanted to appear reasonable. She spoke in soft language, boundaries, stress, misunderstanding, control. She didn't call Arthur a liar. She implied it with tone. Diane waited until Madison settled into confidence, then stood. Mrs. Coleman, Diane said calmly, you said in mediation that Mr. Coleman is old and doesn't need the money. Did you say that? Madison's smile flickered. I was emotional. Diane nodded. Did you say you have what, a few years? Madison's jaw tightened. I didn't mean it like that. Diane turned slightly, addressing the judge. Your Honor, that statement speaks directly to motive, why they believed they could keep the benefit without consequence. Madison's eyes flashed, but she stayed quiet. The judge listened without reaction, but Logan could feel it. The floor shifting under the narrative. Finally, Arthur was called. He walked to the stand slowly, not because he was weak, but because he was measured. He sat down, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Diane kept her questions simple. Mr. Coleman, why did you give Logan money? Arthur's voice was steady. Because he was my grandson, because I loved him, because I raised him. Did you intend those payments to be gifts? Arthur looked toward Logan for half a second, just long enough to show the pain was real. No, Arthur said, I intended them to be help with repayment when he could. He agreed. He signed. And when you were told to leave, Arthur's eyes stayed on the judge now. I left. Why did you sue? Arthur took a breath. Because I realized love without respect becomes a target, and I'm not a target. Silence filled the courtroom. The judge leaned forward slightly. Mr. Coleman, she asked, what outcome are you seeking? Arthur didn't hesitate. Repayment, and if repayment can't happen, the house, because that house exists because of my money and my trust. The judge nodded, slow and thoughtful. When court recessed for the day, Logan walked out like he'd been drained of color. Madison grabbed his arm. She's biased, Madison hissed. She's old too, she's siding with him. Logan pulled away. "Stop," he said, voice sharp, "just stop." Madison stared at him, shocked. Logan looked past her down the hallway where Arthur stood with Diane, calm and quiet. And for the first time, Logan understood this wasn't a family argument anymore. It was a reckoning. 2 weeks later, the ruling came. Arthur sat in the courtroom with his hands folded, his heart strangely calm. He'd already lived the worst part, being thrown out by someone he loved. Whatever happened now would be paperwork and outcomes. Logan sat beside his attorney, knee bouncing uncontrollably. Madison sat rigid, arms crossed as if posture could protect her. The judge entered. Everyone rose, everyone sat. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked down at the file. "I have reviewed the evidence," she began, voice even, "including bank records, receipts, the promissory note, and testimony." Logan felt his mouth go dry. "The defendants argue that these funds were gifts," the judge continued. "However, the promissory note signed by both defendants contradicts that assertion. The note establishes intent to repay." Logan's attorney shifted but didn't speak. The judge went on. "The plaintiff is an elderly individual who acted in a caretaker role and provided significant financial support based on familial trust. The evidence supports that the defendants benefited materially and then attempted to sever the relationship while retaining the benefit." Madison's lips tightened. Then the judge said the sentence that turned the room into ice. "I find in favor of the plaintiff." Logan's chest seized. The judge listed the remedy like she was reading weather, but every word hit like a hammer. "Judgment is entered for Arthur Coleman in the amount of," she read the number, "full repayment of the documented debt plus interest." She included certain additional costs, and because of the nature of the conduct, she allowed enhanced remedies under applicable protections for elders in financial exploitation situations. Logan barely heard the total. He only heard, "You owe." Then came the part that ended Madison's certainty. "Because the defendants have not demonstrated ability to satisfy the judgment through liquid assets," the judge continued, "the court authorizes enforcement measures, including a lien against the Maple Ridge property." A lien. Logan's attorney's shoulders dropped. Madison's face went pale. The judge wasn't finished. "If the judgment is not satisfied within the statutory timeframe," she said, "the plaintiff may seek further enforcement, including the forced sale of the property." Forced sale. Logan's mind went blank. Madison's hand flew to her mouth, not out of empathy, but shock. The judge looked up, eyes steady. "This court is not blind to the emotional nature of family disputes. But family status does not exempt individuals from accountability, especially when documents and sworn testimony demonstrate misuse of trust." Then she closed the file. "Court is adjourned." The gavel came down. And just like that, Logan and Madison's house stopped feeling like theirs. Outside, Madison erupted before they even reached the parking lot. "This is insane," she hissed. "How can they take our house because your grandfather is?" Logan spun on her. "Don't," he snapped. Madison blinked. "Logan, you can't blame me. Your grandfather is doing this." Logan's voice broke. "No. We did this." Madison's face hardened. "So what, you're going to cry and hand him everything after he dragged us through court?" Logan stared at her. "Dragged us, Madison, we threw him out." Madison scoffed. "We needed space." Logan laughed bitterly. "You told him he had a few years." Madison flinched. "I said it in anger." "And you meant it," Logan said quietly. For a second, Madison looked like she might say something softer. But her pride saved her. "So what now?" she demanded. "We appeal." Logan shook his head. "We can't afford it." Madison's eyes narrowed. "We'll refinance." Logan swallowed, remembering the Lee's pendants. "We can't." Madison's voice rose. "Then we sell." Logan's hands opened helplessly. "We can't, Madison, there's a lion." Madison stared at him as if he'd failed a test. Then she looked away, jaw clenched. "So your grandfather wins." Logan's eyes drifted to the courthouse doors. Arthur stepped out with Diane a moment later. Logan expected Arthur to look satisfied, smug even, but Arthur just looked tired. Diane spoke to him quietly, then left him alone for a moment. Arthur stood on the steps, breathing in cold air as if he was learning how to live again. Logan walked toward him without thinking, as if drawn by gravity. "Grandpa," Logan said, voice raw. Arthur turned. Logan's throat tightened. I didn't think it would end like this." Arthur's eyes were calm. "It ended the way you chose, Logan." Logan swallowed. "Can we fix it? I'll pay." "I'll figure it out." Arthur held Logan's gaze. "You didn't come to fix it when I was standing in your doorway holding muffins." Logan flinched. Arthur's voice softened slightly. "But if you want to pay what you owe, do it. Not because you're scared now, because it's right." Logan nodded, tears stinging his eyes. Madison watched from a distance, arms crossed, face cold. Arthur looked past Logan to Madison, then back. "I'm not your enemy," Arthur said. I'm the bill that came due, and then he turned away. The deadline came faster than Logan imagined. The court didn't care about his anxiety, Madison's anger, or the fact that the house smelled like their life. The court cared about payment. Logan tried everything. He liquidated a small investment account. He sold his second car. He called friends he hadn't spoken to in years. He asked his boss for an advance. He even swallowed his pride and asked Madison to help. Madison refused. "It's your grandfather," she said. "You handle it." Logan stared at her. "It's our debt." Madison's eyes turned sharp. "No, Logan, it's your family drama." That sentence was the moment Logan saw their marriage without the filter. When the sheriff's notice came, paper taped cleanly, officially, the house felt suddenly unfamiliar, like it had been pretending to belong to them, waiting for the law to say otherwise. Notice of sale. Madison ripped it down and crumpled it in her fist. "This is harassment." Logan's voice cracked. "It's enforcement." Madison paced the living room. "We'll move," she said. "We'll rent something. This house isn't worth humiliation." Logan looked around at the walls Arthur had painted, the shelves Arthur installed, the faucet Arthur fixed. "It wasn't just a house," he murmured. Madison scoffed. "It was a symbol. And symbols can be replaced." But Logan couldn't replace what was cracking inside him. The day of the sale, Logan stood across the street while strangers walked through his home with clipboards. Their shoes clicked on the hardwood floors like judgment. Madison stayed in the car, sunglasses on, refusing to watch. "I'm not giving them the satisfaction," she said. Logan wanted to scream that it wasn't them. It was them. It was him. It was her. He watched a couple, young, excited, point at the kitchen, smiling. His stomach twisted. Arthur arrived quietly, not with a grin, not with celebration. He stood beside Diane, hands folded, face unreadable. Logan's feet moved before his mind did. He walked over. Arthur didn't look surprised. Logan stopped a few feet away. "Are you really going to take it?" he asked, voice hoarse. Arthur's eyes rested on him. "I didn't take anything," he said. "You did. I'm getting it back." Logan swallowed. "Madison says you're doing this to punish us." Arthur's gaze drifted to the car where Madison sat like a statue behind tinted glass. "Madison thinks a lot," Arthur said, "but she doesn't understand consequences." Logan's eyes filled. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know it doesn't fix it." Arthur's expression softened just slightly. "I know you're sorry now," he said. "Fear makes people honest." Logan flinched. Arthur continued, voice quiet, "But love should have been enough to make you honest." The auction began. Numbers were called. Bids rose. Logan felt each bid like a piece of his life being priced out loud. When it ended, a bidder won, someone from out of town, likely an investor. The sale price was enough to satisfy a large portion of the judgment, but not all. Still, the lien would be paid from the proceeds. Arthur would recover most of what he was owed. Logan's knees felt weak. Madison finally stepped out of the car, face tight. "Happy?" she called, voice sharp, aimed at Arthur. Arthur didn't answer her. Madison marched toward him. "You destroyed our life," she spat. Arthur looked at her with quiet pity. "I didn't destroy anything," he said. "I revealed it." Madison's eyes blazed. "You could have just let it go." "You're old. What do you need it for?" Arthur's voice stayed calm, but every word was steel. "I need it because it's mine, and because I will not be treated like a wallet you can throw away." Madison scoffed. "So you'd rather watch us suffer?" Arthur nodded slowly. "I'd rather watch you learn." Madison's mouth tightened. She turned to Logan like he was a weapon she could still use. "Say something," she demanded. "Tell him he's wrong." Logan stared at Arthur, then at Madison. And for the first time, Logan didn't choose Madison. He didn't even choose himself. He chose truth. "No," Logan said quietly. "He's not wrong." Madison froze, stunned. Logan's voice steadied. "We were wrong." Madison's face twisted with fury. "Then stay with your precious grandfather," she snapped, and in front of everyone, neighbors, bidders, strangers, she walked back to the car, got in, and slammed the door hard enough to make the whole vehicle shake. She drove away. Logan stood there like a man whose life had been split cleanly down the middle. Arthur watched the car disappear, then turned to Logan. "I didn't want that," Arthur said quietly. Logan's eyes burned. "Neither did I," Arthur nodded once, then learned from it. And he walked away, leaving Logan on the curb, staring at the house that was no longer his. Months later, Maple Ridge Lane looked the same from the outside, but for Logan, nothing was the same. He rented a small apartment across town. The walls were thin, the carpet smelled faintly of old cooking. The place had none of the shine Madison had demanded, none of the space that made him feel successful. His phone was quieter now. Madison didn't call. At first she texted angry messages, then bargaining messages, then cold ones about lawyers and separation paperwork. Then she disappeared into silence. Logan could tell people a story where she was the villain. It would be easy. But he couldn't escape the truth that haunted him most. He had been there when his grandfather stood in the doorway, and he told him to leave anyway. Arthur, meanwhile, didn't buy a new car. He didn't take a lavish trip. He didn't suddenly live like a man who'd won. When the judgment money came through, Arthur did something Logan never expected. He paid off what was left on his modest home. He set up a small scholarship fund at the local trade school in his late son's name, and he donated a portion to a community legal clinic that helped seniors who'd been financially exploited by family members. When Diane told him, Logan sat in his apartment staring at the wall, feeling sick. Even after everything, Arthur didn't turn into a monster. Arthur turned into a man who refused to be prey. Logan tried to see him twice. The first time, Arthur didn't answer the door. The second time, Arthur opened it but didn't invite him in. Logan stood on the porch like a child again, but this time there was no comfort in it. "I'm not here for money," Logan said quickly. "I'm not here for anything." Arthur's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then why are you here?" Logan swallowed. "Because I miss you." The words came out small, unarmed. Arthur looked at him for a long moment. The neighborhood was quiet. A dog barked somewhere. Leaves scraped along the sidewalk. Finally, Arthur stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind him. "I miss the boy I raised," Arthur said softly, "but you're not that boy anymore." Logan's eyes burned. "I want to be." Arthur nodded. "Then start acting like it." Logan's hands clenched. "Tell me what to do." Arthur's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of years. "Stop looking for shortcuts. Stop letting other people tell you that loyalty is weakness. And stop pretending love is something you can spend and never repay." Logan's throat tightened. "Madison," Arthur raised a hand. "Don't blame her. She didn't sign your name. You did." Logan flinched, but he nodded. Arthur continued, "You asked me once when you were 15 why I kept showing up. Remember that?" Logan blinked. "I kind of." Arthur's mouth softened at the memory. "You said, 'Why do you care so much, Grandpa?' And I told you, because someone cared enough to show up for me when I was young. That's how it passes down." Logan's eyes spilled over. "I broke it." Arthur's gaze held him. "You did," he said, honest, "but you can rebuild it." Logan wiped his face with the back of his hand, ashamed. "Will you ever forgive me?" Arthur didn't answer quickly. He didn't give forgiveness away like a coupon. "I forgave you the day you threw me out," Arthur said at last, and Logan's chest tightened with relief until Arthur finished. "I forgave you," Arthur said, "so I wouldn't carry poison, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. And it doesn't restore trust overnight." Logan nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand." Arthur's eyes softened just a little. "Good," he said, "because that's where real change starts." Logan hesitated. Can I come by sometimes, help you, earn it?" Arthur studied him, then he nodded once. "You can start with something simple," he said. "Next Saturday the gutters need cleaning." "Bring gloves." Logan let out a shaky breath, half laugh, half sob. "Okay," he whispered, "I'll be here." Arthur opened the door, then paused. "Logan," he said. Logan looked up. Arthur's voice was low and steady. "The house wasn't the real thing I took back." Logan's brow furrowed. "What was it?" Arthur held his gaze. "My dignity," he said, "and my peace." Then he stepped inside and closed the door gently, not like a slam, not like rejection. Like a boundary, like a new beginning that had to be earned. And Logan stood on the porch in the quiet American afternoon, understanding for the first time that love isn't proven by what you take, it's proven by what you protect.